Welcome back to Storytime with Uncle Reddit. I'm John, and this is r/pro revenge. I want to thank you guys for all the subs and likes and comments. Yeah, keep them comments coming. I like that. I like the interaction. I don't always answer or respond to comments. It's just a time thing, really. But I try to at least read them and acknowledge them with a thumbs up or a heart or something. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming to the channel and watching. Looks like we're coming up hard on 1,000 subscribers here soon, which is great. All right, let's get to the stories. I would like a raise and time off, and I want to start this off by clarifying this is not my story. It's the story of someone very close to me, and I'll leave out a large amount of specific detail because quite a bit of info is not mine to reveal. The build up to the revenge is that this person had a horrible employer. She worked HR and managed payroll at what was effectively a nursing home. I don't know that they call themselves that, but it's what they are. The company had a bit of a good old boys club going on, with all the highest level management being older men, who all did less work and got more pay than pretty much everyone else. There were regular complaints from women about being mistreated, and many women were fired for absolutely absurd reasons, followed by their male coworkers getting raises. That in and of itself was bad, but it's not what instigated the need for revenge. What caused the burning desire to get back at the company was when the company fired my friend's manager, who was a woman, because she took a week off after literally breaking a leg, badly. The HR department was already badly understaffed, so my friend had to take on the responsibilities of this manager without any pay bonus. She requested a pay bonus multiple times, denied each time. A month or so later, the company hires a new manager to replace the old one at nearly twice the salary. This new manager is an older man. I'm not entirely sure what this guy actually did during the day because my friend continued to do all the managerial tasks. And she knows that for a fact, because the guy's account didn't have access to the systems he needed access to, and he never asked for that access. For 6 months, my friend showed this manager issues with their system, including payroll, and explained that she was not only the only employee who knew how to use the payroll system, but she was the only one with access to it. The sexist D-bag ignored her, and made regular comments about how she was replaceable and useless. One day, she loses her crap. She set up a bot with her credentials to automatically assign her pay each pay period, according to her actual salary, so not stealing or anything. She then carefully plans her next move and puts in her 2-week notice, right before a large department-wide week off and right before her only coworker has a 2-week vacation. She wouldn't have time to train the coworker even if the coworker was in the country. The manager still dismissed her, thinking he could just hire someone who knew what they were doing. Little did he know, she had tweaked with the payroll software over her time there. Nothing super awful, but it was very different from what the base software was. She was the only person who knew how to properly use it, and the only person in the whole company, including the CEO, who had access to the necessary numbers to actually run the payroll. When she leaves, after the 2 weeks, the company has 2 whole pay periods where they do not pay their employees. They can't. But my friend still gets paid because they never disabled her automatic payment thing. They couldn't. Eventually, they called her and basically begged her to consult with them on their payroll. For the past 6 months, she's been paid $250 an hour for 5 hours a week to run the company's payroll. Fully remote, even though it was an in-person job before. And to top it all off, she doesn't even actually work the 5 hours. She wrote a script on her personal device to process payroll for her. She just has to press one button. She's working another job now, but damn, she really kicked them in the ass for their stuff. Well, I can't speak to the whole sexist thing. I've never had to really, well, that's not true. I did have to deal with it a little. We had an office manager, female office manager, who thought all guys, specifically carpenter guys, because that's what worked where I worked, were stupid. Just, knuckle-dragging morons. And she treated us just like that. So sexism goes both ways. Was this a good old boys club, old white guys? Maybe. But some bosses are just jerks, no matter what. And it may not be a male-female thing. I've noticed sometimes, too, that it's just whoever's willing to kiss the most butt. So maybe the guys were just afraid of losing their spot, losing their job, not getting raises. I don't know. But it could be. But good for OP's friend for sticking up for herself and kind of sticking it to him. Dealing with an entitled neighbor. Just flipping through a few stories and reading about entitled drivers getting their just desserts. This made me think back to my days as a paramedic. We got a call to a house where there was a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. Wow. This story isn't really about them, though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had come across before, and boy was this chap a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and had a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There had been a number of letters from the council regarding this, and a number of parking fines just served to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in the disabled spot, but had parked a second car, blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip, so needed to go in. I sent my colleague round to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars, and when they came back, I was told the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. I guess that's the equivalent of telling him to F off. No problem. Time to get the message home. I radioed through to our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service were the first to arrive, and I spoke to the crew commander to let him know what the situation was. A fireman went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car and was told the same as my colleague. The message was relayed back, and the watch commander just asked me one question. Is the patient's life at risk? I knew exactly where this was going, and it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was, yes, there's equipment I need to get into the house and the driveway is blocked, preventing me from doing so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move those vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out, spitting and screaming, was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police fell on deaf ears. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patient's life any easier, and sadly they died a few months later without leaving the hospital. But it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. Well, that was a little bit of a sad twist. Yeah. Sorry the patient died, and yeah, nobody should judge anybody because we've all got enough faults of our own to be judged, so... I mean, listen, we're all human. We all judge to a certain extent, but at some point you gotta be like, okay, I'm not in their shoes. I don't know what's going on. Who am I to judge? Anyway, that is so cool that the fire service was willing to relocate the vehicles for you to get your job done and get that patient to the hospital. And a broken hip can be life-threatening. Blood clots, everything else, so, screw him. He infringes my art. I shut down his print shop and ruined his career. A little backstory. I'm an online artist, and this took place when I was in my early 20s. There was a popular artist who calls himself a professional and works in the industry. I used to look up to him. Let's call him Zach. Lately, I noticed how Zach's art looked eerily too familiar to a piece of media I've seen before, so I looked up the images and found it too matched up to his art. He was directly referencing official art and profiting off of it by selling it on his print shops online. He didn't make any effort to make the reference detached from the original piece. I confronted him about it, sending a detailed message not to do that and the possible consequences. I've seen artists in real life who are sued for over $100,000 and to the extent in jail for doing what they did. Instead of being professional and mature about it, he lashed out at me and took it to social media, telling me how wrong I was to falsely accuse him since artists use references and how I could get sued for libel. I was dumbfounded at how clueless he was, not comprehending what I was talking about. He included my username, which my blog had links to my contacts, my emails, Facebook page, art accounts, and Instagram. His fans, including his group of friends, joined in, sending me downright horrific messages. I had panic attacks resulting from the pure backlash of his enormous fan base. I constantly received hate mail, telling me how horrible I am as a person, how crappy my art was, and to the extent of death threats for almost an entire month. The last straw that broke the camel's back was when he directly referenced off of my art and made money off of it. I didn't know how to find a lawyer, and I feel hopeless and angry that I couldn't do anything about it. Later it hit me, if I can't do it, then maybe another artist can, or anyone that holds the copyright. The last time I remember, Zach never credited any of these artists for his references. I looked into the art he referenced and examined each official company matching Zach's art. I used Google search to find anyone working for a said company, and voila, I found a staff member for a branch in a different continent. Let's call him Cody. I contacted Cody's Facebook and tipped him about Zach's activity through Messenger. I uploaded and sent a copy of their art and Zach's art for comparison. Cody just simply replied, "We'll contact our legal team. Thanks for the notice." Another week passes by, and during that time, he constantly posts every damn thing I post about in my art blog. And then silence. I checked, and his print shop was removed. His response to my message was taken down from his social media. He stops talking to his friends publicly. Days later, a fan was asking about him, and he responded how he is no longer friends with them because they're very toxic hypocrites. One of his former group of friends contacted my friend and cried about how awful a bully he was. Of course, my friend didn't care. It was the most glorifying feeling I have ever rejoiced. This would have been avoided if he at least heeded my warnings. How he handled the situation was not professional at all. About 5 years later, I'd been informed that apparently he has a tough time getting back into the industry after there were allegations of his past copyright infringement. The biggest one was having a lawsuit with the big company Cody worked for. Yeah, copyright infringement is tough, man. As YouTubers, we deal with that kind of stuff constantly. There's a fine line between copyright infringement and fair use. At the very least, you got to give credit to the original artist. Even for these stories that I read, I have to give some kind of credit. Now, I don't do that verbally because I get tongue-tied with usernames so easily. That's why I put up a picture of the username, the thread it came from, the date, everything, and a link to it. Down in the description box, there's also a direct link to that person's thread. So I'm trying to do what I can to transform the material, give credit to the original poster, and, go from there and just put my twist on it. But if I was to just read these stories and nothing else, which a lot of channels do, and I'm not so sure I agree with them. I don't know if they're doing anything illegal or not, but there's a few channels that don't do any of that stuff. So, or they give credit and they don't comment on it and do transformative work to it. Take that for what it's worth. Wage theft revenge. I worked in maintenance for a religious organization that owned a large number of aged care facilities. Even though they were supposedly not-for-profit, they went all out to scam the government for as much money as they could. For example, I once saw a claim for wandering behavior in a bedridden resident so they could claim he had dementia, put him in a locked ward, and get extra money. I became aware that they were paying less than the minimum wage for many of the non-nursing staff. A high percentage of housekeeping were from overseas, and God told them they could get away with it. In my country, you can claim back wages for 6 years, and it so happened I was just about to reach that mark, and I was thoroughly sick of their hypocrisy. I scheduled a meeting with the care manager and human resources. In the meeting, I requested to be paid the correct wage. After they realized I was not going to back down, they agreed to pay me correctly and would back pay me, but only if I didn't tell the other employees. I declined, and it ended up costing them over $700,000 to back pay everyone. I was recording the conversation and took them to Fair Work, an independent workplace ombudsman. They made everyone with the same job description as me redundant because they couldn't think of a way to legally fire me, and then outsourced maintenance, which ended up costing them much more. I took a nice holiday with the redundancy pay and informed them, with documented proof, to the government aged care regulator for the fraud. They were inspected with a fine-tooth comb, and 2 of their flagship homes were put under 6 months constant government supervision. Always remember that wage theft is the largest crime wave in history. It's ongoing, and no one ever goes to jail for it. Man, there's a trend with old folks' stories today. So I used to do maintenance in a aged care facility, and it was a religious organization. I will say that it wasn't the organization itself that had corruption issues, at least in my case. It was more like certain managers. The director of the home, they tended to turn a blind eye to things. And I don't know if it was intentional or if they were just slow. But anyway, different department managers would put in for extra money for this and that and the other thing. And when they would get extra money for things like that, different patient issues, different facility needs, they would also get a percentage in some sort of a bonus at the end of the year. So that was the biggest problem where I was. And then you had employees, even if they were being paid really decent wages for their job title, that really didn't care. Like, they didn't care about anything. They didn't care about the job. They didn't care about doing it well. They didn't care about the patients. They didn't care about themselves most of the time. Yeah, in this country, in the U.S., retirement facilities, respite homes, nursing facilities, things like that, there's a track record of them attracting a certain type of employee who really just is putting in their time and going home. In fact, some of them are downright abusive to their clients, and it's really sad. And it's not something new. This has been going on off and on for years, and it's something we just need to pay attention to. And unfortunately, no amount of good pay is going to take care of that, because I was in a hospital once where I had a nurse, RN, who was paid very well. I know what the pay scale was like for them at that hospital. And yeah, she was one of the meanest, nastiest people I've ever met in my life, and probably was in the wrong type of work. But all that to say, if you're getting ripped off for your position, get the correct pay or walk. And if they're doing it illegally, then turn them in. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed these stories. And if you did, would you do me a favor? Maybe click that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we're trying to hit that 1,000 mark. And click that little bell icon so you don't miss the next time the fat guy with the beard tells you stories. See ya.